Hello and welcome to this morning's webinar, How Sodexo's award-winning approach to proactive safety is preventing fatigue and distraction-related incidents. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jerome Carslake and I'm the Director of the NRSP. Next slide please, Scott, and its many activities. To find out more about the program, check out our website, register for our newsletter, or even better, follow us on social media such as LinkedIn. The next slide. Today's session will go for around 60 minutes. We've got 40 minutes for presentation and 20 minutes for questions. And our focus is going to be taking them throughout. So the question box is open, so please use that. And we'll delve on in. So here's our question slides. Oop, there we go. Our question slide is just back there. If you haven't used GoTo before, chuck them in there and then we'll be all ready to roll. So I know Scott's keen to go. He's just had a sip of water and ready to roll. So, g'day, Scott.
Hiya, Jerome, how are you?
Good, thanks, mate. And thank you for joining us. I know you're over in sunny Perth. So for those of you who haven't come across Scott or you had the pleasure of meeting him at the AFMA conference this year, where he happened to, Sodexo won the Fleet Safety Managers Award for this year. So congratulations to that, Scott.
Thank you, no trouble, thank you.
So Scott's background, he started his career in road transport and logistics around 15 years ago, managing transport and delivery options for a national air conditioning supplier in the United Kingdom. Packed up his bags, moved to Australia in 2012. He spent 5 years with BHP Nickel West, overseeing critical logistics movements of containerised product and processing facilities in Kwinana and Kalgoorlie to Fremantle ports. Following that, he took a career transition in 2018. And he returned to the transport sector in 2020 with Sodexo, beginning as a scheduler, and quickly found himself in his current position as mass transport manager, where he provides strategic leadership for Sodexo's comprehensive bus transport and aviation portfolio. So super high risk there across the Pilbara region of Western Australia. So you carry a lot, mate.
Thanks, Jerome. Hello, everyone. Morning to you all, and thanks for taking time out of your day to join us on this webinar. First shout out, just a quick special thanks to the NRSPP and AFMA teams for putting this together and inviting me along today. Really proud to be here today to discuss Sodexo's journey. Our team have worked so hard over the past 4 years to move our mass transport operations to a place where we can sit here today, shine a light on it for all you to see, and unpack some of the learnings that we had, and hopefully share some of those with you and help some of your experiences increase across the transport sector. So I wanted to kick today off. I'm not going to try and get too into the weeds because obviously I do waffle on a bit. So just wanted to kick today a high level overview of who Sodexo are, what we do globally, our footprint in Australia, and then we'll really dive into the transport space in WA and how we operate. So let's get going. So who are Sodexo? So for those who haven't heard of us before, we're a global leader in food services and facilities management, founded out of France in the 1960s, operating across 55 countries. We serve over 100 million consumers each day, employing more than 500,000 people across our 27,000 sites. So really, really large footprint, massively global. Most of our non-Australian operations are corporate accounts. We look after hospitals, schools, government sectors, and private operations, taking care of such things as their catering and cleaning. However, here in Australia, we've really moved away from that, focusing solely on the energy and resources sector, given Australia is so unique. And we deliver a range of integrated services across catering, cleaning, facilities, and asset management, aerodrome and transport services, which is where I come in a bit, and a lot more than that. So in layman's terms, the Australia and Sodexo focus on soft services at a mine site, accommodation and village services, and leave the mining to the big boys to do what they do best, really. So who we are in Australia. So our main portfolio in Australia is our Rio Tinto iron ore contract. So we look after the operations for those in the Pilbara in West Australia. Really, really massive body of work. And the integrated contract, the facilities management contract that was won in 2016 was the largest of its kind globally. So just some key figures, just diving into there on the map. We operate across 24 remote sites in the Pilbara and 6 towns. We're based out of Perth here. Our head office, our corporate office for the IFMS contract, the Rio contract, is in Perth. So we're managing those remotely from here into the Pilbara. So we serve 14 million meals each year to workers, managing 17,000 rooms, and we actually touch those and clean them over 700,000 times each year. So again, massive churn of support staff needed across those sites. Our facilities management teams manage 1.5 million assets, and we keep those villages stocked up with suppliers from Perth, carried on 3,300 semi-trailers each year, which amounts to about 65 each week. So really, really vast moving figures. To get the miners into place and working and again doing what they do best for Australia's economy, we manage 4 aerodromes across the Pilbara, handling over 11,000 flights each year. And once those workers arrive onto site, our mass transport services step in and take them to where they need to be. So, what is mass transport in Sodexo's IFMS or Rio Tinto portfolio? We've got massive fleet in Pilbara, moving workers from aerodromes across to their villages, the accommodation blocks out to the mine sites and back again daily, and everything really in between. So additional services, events, again, movements village to village, town to town, and responding to a number of natural events along the way, bushfires, flash floods, cyclones, and everything else that the Pilbara manages to throw at us in between. So any one time, we have over 200 buses on the road, and we expand our fleet with contractors as the need requires for shutdowns and the like, as services require. Our bus fleet travel over 6.5 million kilometres each year across that fleet, while ensuring 3 million of those Rio Tinto and contracting passengers are transported safely, again, across some of Australia's harshest and remote landscapes. So 6.5 million kilometres each year with 3 million passengers on, done in most of our journeys are conducted under black spots, no signal, no phone signal, weather conditions, really extreme conditions that the teams are operating out there. So much so, to move those 3 million passengers, we conduct over 20,000 journeys each month. And when you pair that with bus drivers working on our main roster for bus drivers in the region is a 14-day on, 7-day off roster. They work across a 14-hour split shift day. We recognise a really, really heavy load on our drivers, carrying out the critical risks that they do and managing that appropriately. So that's why we've really lent heavily into fatigue monitoring systems, and it's really formed the basis of our safety journey over the last 4 years, which we'll dive into obviously a bit more in the coming slides, and we can talk about that fatigue monitoring maturity and where we are and as a business how we've grown with it. Supporting that heavy vehicle fleet, we have additional 500 assets of both LVs and mixed use. Most of these are used in other departments, such as trades, air conditioners, village services, and they present their own obvious risk profile, given that the operators aren't professional drivers. So our HR drivers, obviously bus drivers, have undergone good training, VOCing, etc. Drivers a profession. People jumping into the LVs, yeah, not so much. But again, we'll unpack that a bit more in the coming slides. So yeah, all in all, really vast portfolio in WA. It's just the sheer complexity of the operations we've seen across the villages. And then just for them to be conducted at such a high frequency and across, again, such a vast and remote landscapes, really amazing. And that's really why I give so much credit to the teams working to ensure we're just such a success on the ground. Obviously, I can sit here today, but the hard work's done very much elsewhere. So, yeah. So we'll dive a bit into, excuse me, I'll just wet the whistle.
So, Scott, I was just wondering as well,
Yes, mate.
you use the term extreme weather event conditions. So give some context. What is extreme?
Oh, so yeah, so we've had just last year alone, we had bushfires threatening 3 of our villages across the dry period. So that meant mass evacuations of sometimes up to 1,000 to 2,000 people and residents out to different villages. So, you know, we're already our driving teams are on a schedule and having to then break that and chuck in drivers into buses to support the passenger movements are some of the key, I suppose the key stressors that, you know, it's all hands on deck to support the teams move that to villages. And then you have to think about the the other villages that are receiving those 2,000 or 2,000 people, how do they have the capacity to flex with that? The kitchens have to expand accordingly to house them, and so really it's a major sort of flex when these sort of things come through. We do watch the bushfire warnings closely and monitor them, and enact our tarps accordingly. Similar to our cyclone, we only had a Cat 3, I think, cyclone hit Karratha recently, or the north, and that meant all villages had to be stood down. We had drivers, driving in really strong winds to move the mining teams around, and just a real increase of risk as those natural occurrences come through. I'll move on, Jerome. We'll have a look at our fleet technology journey. So having a look at the complexities and I suppose the operations in all its glory, we can start unpacking really why we're here today, and that's to give you a bit of an insight into the safety journey that our mass transport stream's been on, and where we are today. So 2016 all started in when we was successful with our tender for the Rio Tinto contract. We're heading into our 10th year now, which in itself is a massive success. I'm going to stick my neck out and say many more years to come, but really grown along with Rio Tinto into a partnership, and we work very closely with them to ensure it's a success. So 2016 we rolled out in-vehicle monitoring systems as standard across our both LV and bus fleets. So the fleet was a lot smaller then compared to what I spoke to in the previous slides. We've grown about 20% each year to get to where we are today. So we just had a small LV fleet and a reasonably sized bus fleet. And so for those, obviously we're all, I'm sure, from the industry, but for those unaware of what IVMS does, in-vehicle monitoring just allows us to really understand driver behaviour, like speeding, harsh braking, seatbelt violations, driver compliance, etc. So really a powerful tool to address drivers' behaviour and skill set, and I suppose overall use of the vehicle. It operates under GPS most of the time, especially in the early systems, and it's really a bit of a shadow system, sort of built into the system, built into the vehicle, just to track, monitor, and ensure drivers are behaving correctly, I'd say. One thing, I'm a strong believer in IVMS systems. I know they do vary across the industry. We have a built-in audible alert for our drivers, so that drivers can be alerted to breaches in real time and correct behaviour at the time. I do really feel that that's a key piece in our safety journey, just allowing drivers to understand that, if they're driving in an 80 and it drops down to a 60 after 3 seconds of audible alerts, then there's a sort of escalation sent to the manager. So that driver has 3 to 5 seconds, 5 seconds of interaction and available time to correct their speeding, just so that a trend doesn't continue, and a poor behaviour continues. So really key part of our IVMS system is that audible alert. I can't stress enough. On to 2021. So I joined the company in September 2020, coming up to my 5th year of time with Sodexo. So we call it DSS internally, but most of you know it just as a fatigue monitoring system. We rolled this out into our heavy vehicle bus fleet in 2021. I'd say definitely at the time, I think fatigue monitoring is much more common now and understood across the industry. But certainly at the time we were rolling this system out, the resources sector here in the Pilbara, and within mass transport, I know probably heavy loads or trucking or that industry did have probably access earlier to fatigue monitoring systems, but certainly our mass transport bus industry, we didn't see so many examples of fatigue monitoring. So we went heavy in on the compliance with DSS or fatigue monitoring, rolling that out to all our units, all our heavy vehicles. We were early adopters, and we were first to work through sort of the teething issues of bringing such a system in. We worked really hard to support our operations teams to ensure the system was a success and that our drivers had confidence in it. So road shows around the teams, training, working through each event as they occurred, and just really sharing the learnings with the driver team. The findings, well, I suppose the findings of and the actions we took in Sodexo's heavy vehicle and bus group and portfolio did lead to some changes in the way we schedule our employees. So, for example, we've learned that drivers' danger zones come around day 10 or 11 of their 14-day swing, not maybe as you'd immediately expect, just to be sort of day 13, 14. So day 10, 11, they seem to peak off, and then maybe pick up some adrenaline as the looming R&R sort of comes towards them. So 10 or 11 of their swing, we sort of step in 9, 10, 11 and make sure there's some extra care given to our drivers, monitor change our frameworks, our schedules, our driving loads. You know, we do have, each site has its own different schedule, as you can imagine, and yeah, there are easier runs and less taxing than others. So yeah, there's a supervisor expectation that they'll shuffle runs accordingly to support that. The years that followed 2021 really did see a shift in understanding around fatigue, especially in the mining industry, supported really closely with our partners at Rio Tinto. And our shared learnings around the system and the risk profile that it was mitigating. And just, you know, once you see these fatigue incidents occur and you see a video of that, you really can't unsee it, and you're aware of the risk that's out there. So Rio Tinto adopted the system and shifted their mass transport global procedure. So they actually ensured that any vehicle, LV and HV, entering their sites from 2022 onwards had a fatigue monitoring camera installed. That was a massive shift in the industry. It applied a lot of pressure across other groups and work groups across the contractors. Obviously, that comes with a cost, which we understand from an industry perspective, that the cost that it impacts small groups and small companies. But I think, yeah, the risk, the support in reducing risk was just far too beneficial in these systems. So really impressed with Rio's step to do that and to lead the edge for the mining companies. A lot have followed suit since, so much so that I'd say that in the Pilbara, a fatigue monitoring system is an expectation, certainly in heavy vehicles and mass transport. And I hope that LV is really following closely behind. So being obviously Rio Tinto, it allowed a lot more, I suppose, sway over and influence over the industry. But yeah, really proud that Sodexo was sort of felt to be a bit of the tip of the spear there, and we were able to share a lot of our learnings for the industry. Excuse me, just another drink. So, yeah.
Let's got a question here as well, Scott, that came through. Just when you're mentioning your Guardian alerts, what's the escalation procedure for them?
Sure. So, excuse me. So our system's set up for a seat vibration and an audible alert when the system detects a fatigue incident, rather than just if it's a distraction event, then it's just an audible alert. If it's a fatigue event where there's eye closure or signs of driver fatigue, there will be a seat vibration. Now, we thought long and hard at the time in 2021 about our steps to take. Most companies sort of maybe act on the third vibration. Sodexo sort of understood that if there's been a fatigue event, there needs to be some sort of interaction with the driver. We can't just ignore it and hope that the driver's good after 2 to 3 events. So part of our process and our training around that is when you have an when you have a seat vibration, pull over to the side of the road and make contact with your supervisor and just do a quick fatigue check and a run through. The hope is, and the expectation, which we see in some cases, is that the Guardian Centre has already made contact with the supervisor to say, hey, there's been a confirmed event and your driver is fatigued. If it's a false alert and it's a false positive, excuse me, and the driver is not in fact fatigued, then just a quick phone call to the supervisor just lets everyone know that things are good to continue. So obviously, doing that in mass transport with a bus full of passengers was a difficult a difficult thing to navigate. But again, we had full support from Rio Tinto to say, yeah, if people are 5 minutes late to a destination, we understand that fully, as long as they're getting the care they need for a driver to make contact with their supervisor. We have 2 levels of the fatigue event protocol, so the fatigue management plan. If there is a drowsiness event, which is sort of a precursor to a microsleep, the driver can continue with their trip after they've made contact with their supervisor if it's just a drowsiness event. If it is a microsleep, which is the more severe of the categories, we do send a support driver out to stand the driver down, and then that driver can then continue the journey on their behalf. Rarely does get to the point of microsleeps, I will say. We've only had a couple in the 4 years since we've had it in, where we've had to sort of take action, and the site's worked really well on that. The drowsiness is obviously the precursor. The seat vibration and the pulling over and the making the phone call seems to just jolt the driver out of any monotonous driving they've done at the time. So yeah, really key learnings there we've seen as a team, and we've worked through that as a result. So in 2024, as a result of the success across the HV fleet and obviously the changing across the industry, we understood the risk that was out there, the fatigue risk, and we completed our install of the 500 or so light and mixed use vehicles in our portfolio. So that was bringing DSS across from our HV to all our vehicles and the entirety of our fleet. And again, really changing the I suppose the driver profile who were using this system. So we went from a professional driver group who understood the risks. Most who had joined Sodexo have used it before, understood that the system's there watching us, keeping us safe, to a group of, let's just say, a different industry, tradesmen, tradespeople. We had electricians, we have plumbers, we have air conditioners. So, the initial response is, I don't want a camera in my vehicle. Why are you watching us now? I can't believe, this is happening, et cetera, et cetera. So the communication had to be really different there. The comms messaging, we've never called it a fatigue camera. It's a sensor that's just picking you up, and then the messaging around shared use success stories are really key for this work group. I think it has normalized now over time. We've had them in for over a year now in place across most of the vehicles. So there is a feeling that the tech's there and it's understood. Just the only thing, unfortunately, we've had to be quite mindful of is cell phone use, which it also detects. So that, unfortunately, is something we still respond to with appropriate escalations. But certainly, fatigue management is dealt with support rather than in investigation. So yeah, some really key understandings there, and I'm really so happy some of the stuff we've seen coming through in the LV world. That I'm really confident that we have these guys protected, and our teams are now on the road working in this environment, and they are safe from fatigue issues, really. Finally, obviously, so our journey from 2016 to 2024 means we have so many fleet out there, so many journeys being conducted, so many items of, so many examples of driving, and so many trips, so many journeys, and across multiple systems now as well, obviously fatigue monitoring and IVMS. Our issue became just a sheer weight of data of what we could really do. So both systems, IVMS and fatigue monitoring, are great for immediate intervention of an action of an incident. So you'll get the phone call or you'll get the message when there's a fatigue event or cell phone use. We'll get the IVMS alert when a driver has gone over 20 kilometers an hour or over the local speed limit. That's all very well and good. But how do you start to look at, I suppose, the picture on a grand scale across multiple drivers? So that's where our partner at Drives Tech came in, notably Tanweer, who built us a fantastic insights platform, which really brought together all these events, all these pictures, all these threads, and really just put them somewhere that we could understand, and start to analyze and really work proactively, rather than, I suppose, reactively than we have been. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to the Tanweer, just to give a couple of slides for Drive Tech. Jerome, any questions before I move on?
We've got a couple here. Got a good one sort of drawing in. So when you have these continuing fatigue events from some of the drivers over longer periods, so what do you do if you see continued fatigue events popping up?
Sure. Yeah. So we again, we try and manage the rosters, but we have had a few drivers in our heavy vehicle worlds that have been referred to for medical and for follow-up GP checkup. What we do find is most of these drivers do have sleep apneas. Unfortunately, the demographic of the bus driver group is probably of a higher demographic where they're a bit more susceptible to sleep issues. And yeah, a few of these drivers have come back with sleep apnea issues, or just dietary changes. So we've got a HSE team here and a HLC team embedded in the teams who sort of can support with driver sort of getting back to fitness for work. So we have a bit of an injury management plan for some, to ensure that they're right. Obviously, a sleep apnea machine, get on a CPAP machine, and that can fix most issues around sleep apnea. So it really is, it's probably highlighting something that may be occurring outside of work, that we can take action on, and we do see the issues dry up.
Nice. Thanks. We've got some other questions. I'll hold them through for the next sort of stage.
Sure. Yeah, let's kick to the end then. All right, cool. So I just wanted to give you a couple of slides here for our insights dashboard. So it really allowed us to, again, as the title says, see the full picture. So we've had the items broken down into our sort of red, amber, green scoring. So our driving, site by site, department by department, and literally driver by driver. So we've been able to create score sets, sort of almost carrot and stick sort of thing for bus drivers and LV users, departments and teams, where we can really dial in and you know, not only do we have worst performers, but we have best performers. So the best performers are called out and you know, vouchers, etc. provided, whereas maybe the more concerning drivers are provided with some extra training or a sit-down discussion about some behaviours that need to be looked at. We also have a really cool little breakdown here. So this is our excuse me, what we're looking at the moment. We're looking at our seatbelt violations here. So we have top right corner there. That's our reduction in seatbelt use over the past, of this period, where we've seen a massive reduction just due to focusing on it really, and due to emailing out to teams and focusing in on driver behaviour. Pleased to say most of it is quite low level. It's vehicles departing and vehicles, you know, drivers setting off and not engaging the seatbelt fully, which I'm sure a lot of us are guilty of, certainly in your home places. But we now have the way of seeing it in real time. One of the fantastic features that I get my teeth into, bottom right, is our hot spotting of events here. So we a lot of, again, there's again our fleet is so spread out across so much distance in the Pilbara. It's so remote and there's so much happening out there. LVs moving around villages to villages that you're never going to see everything that obviously you want to see. Well, now we can, I suppose, but we got, you know, if an LV driver, for example, is moving from a village to village and harsh brakes on a turn, then they probably just, that bend came up a bit too quick. I just had to brake a bit sharply there. They'll probably just carry on their journey and get back to base and think nothing of it. The LV behind does it, brakes in the same position, and then maybe 3 or 4 that week's brake in the same position. I think we've got a bit of an issue with the maybe either the speed coming up to the bend or just the I suppose the awareness of that bend. That's just an example. So then we can dial in, we can really zoom into these hotspots of where these things are happening, and we can start to unpack really good analysis and events data to understand what's happening. And we can either share that with the teams. Hey, at pre-starts, guys, this speed has to be amended as you approach here. Be careful with this bend; it's a blind bend, etc. Or we can work with the Shire, or hopefully if it's on the mine site, will support us with a reduced speed limit there. So really impressive sets of data we can get after. Driving around schools in townships, and we do have children unfortunately interacting with a lot of our fleets in these townships where workers are residential. And it's just great to see that mapped out, that we can actually start diving into this and being really proactive about it before an incident that does occur, that LV comes off the road at that blind bend. We've got in there early and put in the management processes in place before that. So that's really allowing us to dive into this. But I suppose what has really allowed us to get into that meatier stuff is probably our impacts and the reduction of serious, I suppose, events over the past 4 to 5 years. Before, while you're focusing on the big things and you're putting out the big fires, it seems like that fire and that big thing comes in every single day. However, as we've started to, we put in fatigue management, we manage the teams, we work around rosters, we build in better behaviours and understandings around fatigue management. Drivers know that we're looking at, we're understanding their speeding and their driver behaviour, so we're amending that. And then as those fires start being put out over a year or two, you start to see maybe the wood through the trees, and you can really be in a point where you can look at the bend in the road and the speed, the harsh braking events that are occurring in towns. So just to go through some of those metrics, we have seen a 96% reduction in true confirmed fatigue events across our HV fleet since 2021, when the software was introduced. Now, that's phenomenal success. That really bids well to the teams on site in managing their teams, understanding their teams. We really lean heavily into our supervisors interacting with our groups. We do aim to have non-driving supervisors on site at each depot, where they can check in with a bus driver every morning. Our hope is that they look them in the eye and they really see what's going on there before they even get in that bus. So there's a big piece of that reduction is down to our supervisors and our teams on site and our operations managers, just to make sure that the culture's there to protect our drivers. We do have a sort of a no questions fatigue management, a fitness for work form each morning. And the encouraging signs are that if you put your hand up and you're not fit to drive, you've had a cold, or, to be honest, when drivers are away, it's probably there's a lot going on at home, or there's something happening in the background, the hidden thing that you can't see. We do have the support of Rio Tinto and our organisation to actually stand that driver down. We double up the run to site, and we do have that flexibility, or we call in a contractor to manage that. So massive commitment from both ourselves and Rio Tinto, and it really does make a difference when we start to see figures like this come down in the true events. I will say that just another thing on the fatigue events, and if you are going through the process of installing it across your fleet, what we did find in the LV fleet is a massive spike in incidents, literally, because you're suddenly seeing something that you weren't seeing before. So we didn't know they was there. Now we're seeing them, and now they're an incident. But so obviously there are some concerns. Suddenly it's like, what is happening in the LV space? And it's almost like the opposite discussion needs to have. It's like, well, we're finally seeing this these incidents. We're finally seeing these things are happening to LV drivers out there. our tradespeople are going through that. And I think, again, it's a massive cultural shift from our teams that they're now managing that. Just as an example, for our LV fleet, we had an air conditioning engineer on call out who had a phone call 1 a.m. to go and fix an aircon unit in the kitchens. Had to jump into his LV to drive to that and conduct that work. Now, if I said that person had a fatigue event, you'd probably say, oh, it's during that time, you know, they drove down there, they'd just woken up or coming back. It wasn't, in fact. The fatigue event for that driver came the next day after lunch, so in that mid-afternoon dip. So they've actually returned back from their work. They've gone back to bed. They've woken up at probably the usual time, give or take, and then returned to work, carried on their usual thing, into the morning fine, probably had a couple of coffees, and then maybe had a bit of a heavy lunch, and then during siesta time or you know, the Spanish equivalent, they've just started to feel that tiredness. So that is really, really key findings for us to then implement across our work groups around schedule management as we see these things come up. So yeah, if you've had a call out in the middle of the night, let's manage that fatigue across the day, rather than just, you know, are you okay to drive down to that aircon unit in the middle of the night? Because likelihood they probably are. They've got the call in the middle of the night. They're full of adrenaline as they jump out of bed, or swearing. They're swearing so much at their luck that that is keeping them awake. But so some really key findings there, which is really excites me, to be honest. 2024, across all fleets since 2024, we've seen a reduction in serious speeding events, so 95% there. So again, that comes down to the dashboard and the analysis, being able to see what we couldn't see before, and just working with drivers to correct behaviours and discussing retraining people, etc. Reduction in distraction events across our HV fleet since 2021. So distraction events being looking out the window for a bit too long. Okay, you get your alarm from the fatigue management system. Distraction, unfortunately, in this case also covers our cell phone use, which we spoke about earlier. And again, that is a management piece that we had to culturally shift around as well. You know, no phones in the cab would be the obvious steps, but we have drivers working in remote conditions across vast distances. Cell phone is needed for troubleshooting and in times of emergency. Until our comms networks improve and we can, you know, use increased communications radios, etc. We do unfortunately rely on cell phones. We then go through a process of managing that at supervisor level. You know, bus checks, make sure these phones are off and away into your bag, so that you can't be distracted. Unfortunately, you know, sometimes it's even the supervisor calling a driver, which is probably the worst case we can get, because we've done something that has put our drivers in a position where they've made an error in judgment. So really some key learnings across our groups, again, worked closely with Rio Tinto to look at that and see how we're working, and we continue to do that. So really key, fantastic areas of improvement there. 84% reduction in seatbelt violations across all fleets since 2024. Again, I personally, so we've had the means of tracking that since 2016, which is through our IVMS system. However, without the visibility to see that laid out, just like we can on their insights dashboard, we haven't really been in a position to do anything about it. You do receive an audible alert in the cab for not putting your seatbelt on. What's probably happened over time, we're across so many different drivers and so many teams and such a vast network of employees that it's probably normalized behavior. You know, the alarm's gone off once. No one's called me about that to tell me that was an issue. I'll try it again. The alarm hasn't gone off, and then, you know, you're 2-3 years down the line, and then we've got some numbers that we probably really need to look at. So obviously, once we saw the insights dashboard, once we could see which drivers were not following probably the best techniques and compliance to seatbelts, then we could sort of start managing those, and we have treated that again with an understanding that it's probably behaviour that's been allowed for a long time. It's probably been normalised, and now we can just shift that and just change the dial on behaviour. Obviously, if there was any speeding, real fast miscompliances, but it does seem to be really low level, low speed stuff, almost like maybe a retic engineer moving from one spot to another, 10, 15 meters, and not putting a seatbelt on. So they're the sort of discussions you're having just to improve your compliance levels. And then finally, 62% in compliance management. So driving on our day 15 is our compliance trigger, or longer than the prescribed limits. Again, 62% doesn't seem too much, but in my opinion, firstly, I had to put a fifth one in just because it looked a bit more even on the page. But I think that just shows that where we've been heading in terms of we focused on the big things first. We focused on the fatigue events. We focused on the speeding events. We focused on the cell phone use, and we've reduced them. And we feel like we've got control of those across the work groups. That we can now start looking at minor things, obviously not minor, but things such as compliance breaches in driving. So I'm really confident that if we met, this time in 6 months or hopefully sooner, that number will be matching the others, just like seatbelts will come up. So I think that really, I just wanted to put that in there just to show that the leading focuses are the critical things that are gonna hurt someone. So fatigue events, speeding, and distraction. Cool.
That's a key point. I like it's a real risk-based approach. You started really on what mattered, where the risk was for your workers, and now you're touching on getting onto the compliance and the management elements. And that's how you get good buy-in with your workers as well.
Yeah, it felt like if we went for everything at once, it's just going to be a bit chaotic out there. So we just really had to dial it back, and the messaging had to focus on the key things. So yeah, really impressed with the teams. Just to wrap us up, just so we can open up to question time, or at least you can don't have to listen to my English warblings anymore. Just wanted to give you a bit of an insight into where we're heading as a group in Sodexo and mass transport. We've seen so much shift over the last 5 years, thanks down to our team members are just so passionate and so involved in making this a success, and I really thank them for that. I'll start at the bottom there. We really proud in our partnership with Rio Tinto and Northfleet to get the first electric bus, in the Pilbara delivered to site, operating out of Tom Price. So our first fully electric Yutong up there in Tom Price. Obviously, again, like I say, most of our sites don't even have cell phone coverage. To get an electric charger unit in place, pulling on the right things across 200 buses, and the rest of the fleet and the rest of the teams up there that want electric solutions, is a real strain on the infrastructure up there. I don't personally think that we'll see a quick change over the coming years, just given around the complexity of what they have to do to upgrade the systems. And yeah, so for us, we trialed a full electric, fantastic results. I love it, and everyone else does. But we probably need a lot more investment into infrastructure and support across that region. Not to say that Pockets can't do it and can't do it well. We do have a site in Gududari that has a solar panel farm. So it's just finding ways to really lean on that and grow the electric industry up there. Happy, obviously, anyone out there who shares our passion to push that and to get in touch. We're open to discussing options and improving, I suppose, the infrastructure up there. As ever, also we continue to try and push the boundaries in our world of our technology. I am fortunate as well to manage the aviation streams for Sodexo, so 4 aerodromes and 11,000 flights handled each year. What you do see is a different level in compliance and procedure and technology that these airlines and that industry leans on. So we do work closely with a company called FCRM, who manage our compliance frameworks, and they do a ton of work in the drone space and are really pushing the boundaries of what drones are capable of doing. I know they work closely with some governmental organizations and police units to really enhance the way they use drones. I'm not this, and this is, this discussion is not going that I'm saying we're going to put drones in, but the idea of how they can control drones and the management systems they use is really something that I'd like to look at and lean into. The control center they have is something I'd really like to push on with here. What I see the benefits of are around just removing that. So at the moment, our LV escalation points are with the team leaders on site, and so is our bus drivers, really, team leaders on site. So you could potentially have a phone call go to a air conditioner's supervisor, and that phone call is telling them about, a risk around driving. When in my eyes, probably a true SME needs to maybe manage those escalations and really work through that with the driver team. So my intent is to bring all that in-house into Sodexo. We do have the capability here. We have seen something similar over in Queensland with Centurion, and some of the shifts that they've done in the industry there is fantastic too. So really trying to just pull on some threads of what the good stuff that's happening out there, and try and unpack that a bit more. And then, as ever, just top right there, always looking at improvements in our 360 monitoring, the passenger impacting and ADAS, etc. So always just looking for the next thing, really, and excited to be able to be in a position where our teams are ticking over so well and doing so, I'd say, fantastically, given the conditions and the circumstances, that we can now start looking at the future and thinking about what we want to achieve and how we can push the boundaries in the space a bit more.
Excellent. Well, we have no shortage of questions for you now, Scott. So
okay, I'll go to the questions slide just to make it look a bit pretty. But
there we go. You can get rid of the slide deck if you want. So first one here is just probably goes back to the beginning. Do the driver shifts comprise of multiple short trips or longer trips? How does the schedule sort of work? And is it a blend of all these?
So the driver schedule. So each site is set up from a village. So for example, a mine where Rio Tinto have found some ore, set up a mine there, and then the next appropriate area that they feel they're not going to need to dig upon is sort of a village is put there, and accommodation blocks, catering services. It's a really, for anyone who hasn't been to one of these, it's a really impressive. It's just a beast that ticks away up there that you don't really see or understand much about. But there's kitchen facilities, there's gyms, swimming pools, etc. So we take the drivers out in the morning to the mine site and where they need to be. And obviously, not every site is built uniformly. So we will have different parts of the mine area that workers need to be taken to, and drivers need to go. And then we build the schedule out from there. Most of our workers need to be on site for 12 hours. So the schedule's really built around getting them to site for 12 hours and then sort of back built from there. So, if they need to be on site at 6 o'clock for pre-start for themselves, then we'll build the schedule out from there. Obviously, if it takes 45 minutes to get there, the bus leaves at 5:15 from the village. Therefore, the driver starts their pre-start at 4:30, for example, and comes into the office. So their 14-hour clock sort of starts from there. They need their 10-hour rest, which we are very, very strict on the 10 hours. So that really builds out our schedules. Our drivers will work across split shifts. So they'll do the morning runs and then they'll rest and recuperate. If there's some runs in the day they need to do, they'll do that. And then they'll come back online in the evening. But that's sort of how the schedule's managed. So we'll sort of have, I suppose, most groups, if they can and they have the right amount of people, they will, new arrivals will do the longer runs or the earlier starts, let's just say. you know, the 4:30, 4:15 starts will be sort of just people to site in their first week of swing, where the latter second we try and manage that and put them on maybe, you know, it's not much time difference, but you know, half an hour extra in bed near the end of your swing is probably very grateful for.
So you just
Our fleets,
ease them.
our fleets. Sorry, mate. Sorry.
You've got to easing them into it.
Exactly. Yeah, we do find. Obviously, I know I said 10 to 11 days is the fatigue hit. We also find day 1 and 2 is, or at least 1 is a shock to the system as well, because you've had a week of R&R and sleeping normally, and then you try and get up at 4:15 and go on your bus runs, and yeah, maybe that's a bit of a management part as well. But our depots vary. We can have some sites have sort of 7, 8, 9 sort of buses, and one of our bigger sites has 25 at any one time. So really vast range of complexity and also volume across that site.
Thanks, Scott. Next sort of question here is around, we see so many false positives with some of these fatigue systems, and some of them are losing confidence in them. How do you manage this, particularly in remote areas where the footage can be reviewed in real time?
Yeah, so a couple of issues really. We do see some units have increased an increase in false errors that we get from either a camera alignment or maybe a system patch update. We usually, on the next maintenance cycle, we'll get our mechanics just to flash update the system. Seems to reduce some of the errors there. If a camera's not quite in line, you know, you're a bit smaller driver jumps in, or someone like me who's a bit too big for the cameras, then it won't quite pick up the line, and we'll see a false alert. They are a problem. They definitely are. We see more false positives than we do positives. My obviously response to that is I'd rather pick up the one and have, you know, one true one than take on sort of five false ones. One thing it does do though, and you need to and obviously the messaging needs to be right to the teams. Drivers can lose confidence in the system if they're getting the audible alert for a false alert and they sort of know that they haven't done anything to move towards that. I have found a couple of times, obviously some drivers say, oh, I wasn't, you know, most drivers until they see the video of themselves nodding off, don't think they have. I have been through I had a micro sleep myself when I was driving when I was 18, which is another story for another time. And yeah, that was a shock to the system. Most drivers aren't aware of that and are surprised. But yeah, the false positives needs to be managed with just good communication and just good understanding of your fleet around that. You know, is there a vehicle that's having a lot of false positives? Then maybe just get in there and have a look at it.
Great, thanks, Scott. So 2 questions here. How do you deal with the poor coverage in the Pilbara? And can drivers pull over and have a nap if they feel fatigued?
B, definitely not have a nap. No, we don't encourage that at all. Firstly, well, pull over and have a rest is probably something that we would encourage. I know that other companies do have a pull over and, you know, take 20 minutes or so. We don't really have that built into our procedures. So we definitely would ask a driver to pull over if they've had an event and have a rest. Obviously, if they're an LV driver, they can pull over to the side of the road and just get out and take a minute. And that can stretch on. So, excuse me, I was a bit harsh in my definite no, but not really encouraged through the terms of nap. But in terms of poor coverage, we're confident that the system protects the driver in areas of no coverage. So if the system goes out of coverage, the driver is still being captured by the system, and it's still seeing that fatigue event. If they do drop off, then there's an event. So at least we're getting the vibration. The jolt is waking the driver up out of their, I suppose, monotony. They can then pull over and go through that process. And then, excuse me, as they come back into coverage or into a spot, that parcel of data is then sent to our supervisor. So we often have moments when they sort of come into coverage again, and then we'll get an alert sort of sent through, and it turns out the alert was about 20 minutes ago. We are getting better up there with coverage. Telstra's doing a lot of network coverage in the region. So we are seeing that less and less. We have a few vehicles hooked up with Starlink now, which is helping those really long black spots. But again, that comes with a cost. So yeah, it's just a management of management of process really for us, and just encouraging the driver to take that break and excuse me for and the rest as such, if they need to.
Nice, thank you very much. We're just about coming up towards the end, so we'll just see if we can squeeze another
Sure.
couple in as well.
Yeah, I'll answer
From the
quickly.
key impacts, how much can you attribute to the IVMS and how much to Guardian? Or is it a combination of A and B?
Oh, yeah, I'd say so. I'd say what Guardian has done in the going into the LV fleet, it's really brought so the IVMS is there in the background, and a lot of drivers don't realise it's there. What Guardian or any fatigue management system being in the cab with the driver does is make them realise that something's there, and they sort of almost have to focus on driver safety. And it's a bit of a visual click towards, okay, there's something in here, and I need to be aware of how I'm operating this vehicle. Whereas IVMS has always been a bit of a shadow. We can tell them, oh, we know you're doing, we know we're watching, we can track you, etc. But having that system in place, looking sort of visible for a driver, seems to have been the shift. But yeah, they're both. And then again, bringing those together into an insights dashboard is more than is probably again 80% of that. So
Thanks, Scott. The last question, and then I've got one little one for myself that I close out with.
yeah.
How did you manage to gain management approval to invest in DSS? And did you do an ROI analysis, or was it purely driven by safety benefits?
So ours was driven by safety benefits. So around the heavy vehicle installations, we again saw that there was a bit of a leading edge here and a leading opportunity for us and Rio Tinto to look at this equipment. The shifts around it in the industry sort of gave us, and the understandings of safety gave it a bit of a no-brainer sort of approach internally around what the fatigue monitoring system does. So we really lent it. ROI, not so much, although now I've had the insights, I could probably lean on that. We have emissions data, etc. But in terms of the fatigue, no, it's just more we've seen X amount reduce. We need to get this in the vehicles that we can't see it happening in. So yeah, luckily, fortunately, we had a company and a partner and everyone else who wants to see that investment take place and support it. But yeah, understand that there is a cost with smaller fleets and different industries.
Nice. Thank you, Scott. So this is my last question to you as we close out. What would be the one take-home message you'd like to leave with everyone?
Oh, cheers. I think the take-home message is that these fatigue events are happening, whether we can see them or not, and being able to see them and have those insights, firstly, and secondly, have a piece of equipment protecting our drivers is the key thing. Whether you can manage them as a business or not, as a massive entity monitoring these systems, even if you just had a small system in place, just notifying the driver of a fatigue event, I think that's a massive step in the right direction.
Awesome. I think it's a powerful closeout for us today, Scott. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone else. We'll explore whether we can answer the rest of these questions, get back to you. Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks, AFMA, for hosting us.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers, AFMA. Cheers, Jerome. Thanks, everyone.
No worries. See ya.
See ya.